I stood on the gleaming marble step of the Grand Imperial, one foot planted firmly, the other hovering, as if I were still debating whether to cross a threshold I had quietly paid to build. My fingers, accustomed to the tactile feedback of circuit boards and the cool metal of robotic arms, gripped the key card, slick with sweat, not from nerves, that feeling had died a long time ago, but from restraint. It took more effort to stay quiet than to scream. 7 years. 7 years of intricate schematics, of all-nighters fueled by bad coffee and silent sacrifices. This lobby, these steps, the shimmer of gold lining the windows, every inch of this place held my fingerprints like a carefully guarded secret. And yet, I wasn't welcome. Not tonight. Not according to them. Hold up, Clara's voice, sharp and saccharine, cut through the hum of the evening like the clink of fake pearls against a glass. Her hand landed squarely on my chest, light enough to avoid confrontation, but firm enough to insult. She tilted her head, a smug expression beneath a cascade of borrowed blonde extensions. Janice and Bethany flanked her, snickering in unison, their champagne already half gone, their entitlement bubbling faster than the drink. I glanced down at myself. A thrifted blazer, a clean shirt, loafers, not designer, not flashy, but nothing that screamed unworthy either. My style had always been simple, practical, function over flash. But to them, my presence tonight wasn't just underdressed, it was unwanted. I wasn't supposed to be here. Before I could say a word, Scarlett stepped out. Her heels clicked against the marble like punctuation marks, sharp, deliberate, expensive. The slit of her emerald green dress ran high up her thigh, and her neckline plunged deeper than our last conversation. She moved like she was made of oil and envy, smooth and flammable. For a moment, she didn't see me. She was all smiles and waves to someone inside, playing the gracious socialite, the polished wife. Then her eyes landed on me. The shift was subtle but lethal. Her lips, previously parting in a charming laugh, straightened into a thin, hard line. She walked over, and with a voice low enough to sound like intimacy but cold enough to cut glass, she said, "Don't embarrass me." Those 3 words. That was our entire marriage condensed into a whisper. I didn't reply. What was there to say? That I had come only because of the invitation forwarded from a client, one Scarlett probably assumed was hers now, like everything else she thought I had left behind. That I was curious to see how far the illusion had stretched, that I wanted to see her with the mask fully on, in her kingdom of pretense. She didn't wait for a response. She turned to rejoin her circle, assuming her message had landed, but I didn't move, not backward, not forward. I stood exactly where I had, keycard still in hand, letting the silence stretch. Janice leaned into Clara, whispering something they both found hilarious, probably about the blazer or the fact that I didn't retaliate. They thought I was harmless, laughable, a punchline that had wandered onto the wrong page. I should have been angry, but all I felt was a quiet, rising calm, because I knew something they didn't. I knew the punchline. And the thing about punchlines, they land harder when the room thinks you're the joke. They didn't know this sidewalk they were guarding like palace gates had once been a mud pit. And I had signed the first check to break ground on this property before the name Imperial was even decided. They didn't know I'd reviewed the first 5 mock-ups of the fountain behind them, or that I'd personally vetoed the 6th because the granite looked too cold. They didn't know the hand-painted mural inside the lobby was based on a photograph I'd taken in Venice during the last vacation Scarlett pretended to enjoy. They didn't know because I had chosen not to tell them. Sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And this strategy had been 7 years in the making. My profession as a robotics engineer had always taught me the power of hidden systems. The most complex machines worked best when their intricate mechanisms were unseen, performing flawlessly beneath a sleek exterior. Scarlett, however, valued only the exterior. Her voice, once sweet enough to sell me a future, had hardened into weaponry over the years. Her love was conditional, sharpened with comparison and sarcasm, measured by public approval. At first, I thought it was ambition. Later, I realized it was survival. Hers, not mine. She needed to be admired, adored, envied, and anything that threatened that image had to be hidden, diminished, or laughed off the property. I wasn't her husband tonight. I was an inconvenience. Fabric too cheap for the lighting. Clara clicked her nails against her phone. You sure he's allowed here? She asked, not even looking at me. Scarlett didn't flinch. Not tonight, she replied. Let's keep this elegant. That one stung. Not because I believed her, but because she believed herself. I finally smiled then. Not bitterly, not sadly. Just with the quiet satisfaction of a man who's memorized the script and knows exactly when the curtain will fall. I didn't need to be let in. I had already arrived. They just hadn't caught up to the story yet. And when they did, well, that would be worth the 7 years of silence. Scarlett's eyes skimmed over my blazer like it had personally offended her. There was no hiding the distaste in her expression, subtle but deliberate. Her lip twitched at the collar like she wanted to ask if I pulled it out of a donation bin. Then, with the poise of someone pretending to whisper but hoping everyone hears, she leaned in and said, My girlfriends brought their partners, real partners, not whatever you are now. She stepped back before I could respond, pivoting on those crystal-embellished stilettos like the insult had been part of some practiced choreography. Clara tittered, clutching her metallic clutch with both hands, as if it contained state secrets. Janice, bless her shallow heart, wasn't as graceful. She leaned forward, squinting at my shoes. Are those loafers real leather, or are they part of the valet uniform? That earned a laugh from Bethany, a low, syrupy sound like someone pretending to care about other people's feelings for sport. I said nothing, not because I didn't have words, but because none of theirs deserved a reply. The lobby beyond them looked exactly like I'd envisioned it when the idea of the Grand Imperial was nothing more than scribbles on my tablet and heated late-night calls with architects in Milan. The chandeliers I had imported from a retired opera house in Florence shimmered above polished marble so clean you could trace your regrets in it. I remembered the first day they tested the dimmer system on those lights. I stayed until 3 a.m. just to watch the slow, golden fade and make sure it matched the warmth I wanted people to feel when they walked in. And now here I was, denied entry by women whose greatest architectural achievement was an Instagram filter that smoothed out their lies. What stung wasn't the laughter. It was the fact that Scarlett let it happen, encouraged it even. She didn't defend me. She didn't soften the moment with a look or a touch or even a deflection. No, she let them pile it on, like she needed them to see what she saw, that I no longer fit her aesthetic, that I was the past. A blueprint that didn't match the new design. What they didn't realize, what not even Scarlett knew, was that I'd never stopped building. They thought I'd gone quiet because I had nothing left. But silence was the most powerful sound in construction. It meant the work had moved underground, deeper, stronger. Real foundations didn't make noise, but they were what kept the tower standing. I stood still, letting their mockery wrap around me like bad perfume. Every insult was recycled. Every look meant to slice. Clara reached over to pluck imaginary lint from my sleeve, muttering, You could have at least rented something. This isn't exactly backyard barbecue attire. Scarlett laughed too loudly, the kind of laugh that begged for audience approval. Janice offered me a tight, pitiful smile and said, Don't take it personally, Steve. We're just having fun. Like that made it better. Like the scene I was enduring was entertainment, not cruelty wrapped in designer dresses. I looked past them, straight into the heart of the lobby. My lobby. My blueprint. The custom floral arrangement perched at the reception desk was exactly the shade of deep plum I'd fought the event planner over 6 months ago. He wanted pale orchids. I said no. Plum felt grounded, regal, more intimate. It drew people in. And now here stood a group of people desperate to keep me out, unaware that they were preening inside a building that had once lived in my sketchbook. What they were spending tonight on wine, on private tastings, on valet, on luxury service, they thought it all belonged to the brand. But the brand was me. Every dollar they gave tonight was circled back through my hands like heat through copper wiring. They were fueling my empire while laughing in its face. I had made a choice a year ago, a deliberate one, to disappear from view. I'd sold my name off the paper trail, moved assets into a trust, and kept my stake in the Imperial off the books. Not even Scarlett knew. She thought the separation of our finances after my exit from consulting meant I'd finally hit bottom. She hadn't asked many questions after the settlement. She was too eager to play wealthy divorcee to care. Let her believe it. Let them all believe it. Clara's date strolled out then, a hedge fund manager whose handshake was all wrist and no grip. He didn't recognize me, of course. Most people didn't, unless they'd been in the trenches with me before the towers rose. He nodded vaguely and asked Clara if she had the tasting pass. She waved it in the air like it was a royal seal. Only the best tables tonight, she chirped, nudging Scarlett. You scored us the prime seats, right? Scarlett gave a tight smile. Of course. I told them I'd be arriving with a few important faces. That was it. That was what this night was about. Not the tasting, not the ambiance. It was about her showing off who she was seen with. Clout by proximity, even if it meant slicing off the man who laid the foundation beneath her heels. And still, I stood there, because the truth was funnier than fiction. Because watching them bask in their ignorance was worth every second of this discomfort. They thought I was trying to get in, that I was crashing a party I couldn't afford, that I was clinging to relevance. But I wasn't trying to get in. I was letting them walk into a scene I had written, staged, and funded, without even realizing the lights were already on and the camera was rolling. They mocked the valet job? Good. Because in a few minutes, they'd learn who signs the paychecks. And suddenly, my blazer wouldn't matter at all. You're not on the list, Bethany said, lips pursed, clipboard clutched like a badge of honor. Her voice had that clawing sweetness people use when they're pretending not to enjoy their authority. But I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of satisfaction at delivering that line to someone she thought didn't belong. Her pen hovered dramatically above the paper, like she was still debating whether to let me in out of pity. Maybe you're at the wrong entrance, she added, feigning concern. I almost laughed. I had written the damn list. Not just the guest list, the vendor list, the layout plans, the investor itinerary, the security protocols. Hell, even the custom paper stock on that clipboard had been selected from a swatch I personally approved because I didn't like the grain in the original batch. And here Bethany was, acting like she was some gatekeeper to a kingdom I built with my own hands and vision. This wasn't just a party. This was the Imperial's crown jewel event curated, tasting for investors, celebrities, and high net worth guests looking to be seen and served. It was a night designed to announce the Imperial as the city's most exclusive luxury experience. What no one knew, at least not yet, was that the man standing outside in a secondhand blazer in calm silence owned a controlling interest in every bottle of wine about to be poured, every amuse-bouche on silver trays, every contract signed in the follow-up. But Scarlett knew. She stood just a few steps behind Bethany, letting the moment breathe, watching me get dismissed like I was some underdressed interloper hoping for a free glass of Prosecco. Her smirk told me everything. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was orchestration. She wanted me denied. She wanted her friends to see it. She wanted to humiliate me quietly, surgically, under the cover of rules and protocol. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about keeping me out. It was about keeping up appearances. Scarlett didn't want people to know I still had power, influence, ownership. She didn't want to be associated with the man who stepped out of the spotlight and into silence. To her, visibility equaled value. And since I'd chosen anonymity, she'd written me off as disposable, forgettable, someone to step over on her way to her next curated chapter. I let the silence stretch between us. Bethany blinked, waiting for me to argue, to pull out a name or a claim or some crumpled invitation. I didn't. I just stood there, calm and still, watching Scarlett squirm behind her glassy confidence. Because underneath that designer dress and cold shoulder was a woman terrified of being overshadowed. And tonight, the shadow was creeping up the walls inch by inch. Behind me, I could hear the valets calling out names, keys clinking, luxury engines humming as guests arrived. The marble beneath my feet still had the faint scent of polish, like the place had been scrubbed of its grit just in time for the night's illusions. A black SUV rolled up, and out stepped a celebrity chef whose last name was now a brand. He didn't glance at me. Why would he? To him, I looked like any other bystander. But the dish he would unveil later? My team had commissioned that menu. I had flown him in on our jet. Bethany clicked her tongue and made a small show of crossing out a name. Sorry, Mr. Reynolds, I said quietly. She looked again, flipping pages as if the name might materialize if she squinted hard enough. Still nothing. Scarlett finally stepped forward, just enough to be heard, but not enough to appear involved. "It's okay," she said to Bethany. "He's no one. Let's just move along." She turned to Clara and Janice, who were fawning over a silver-bearded executive behind them. "We don't want to be late for our table. No one." That stung for a half second, not because I believed it, but because it reminded me how far she'd fallen. The woman who once curled up beside me in an apartment with creaky floors and whispered that she didn't need mansions or marble, just faith, just partnership. She said, "We're going to build something people talk about for generations." I believed her. Back then, her ambition looked like love. Now I saw it for what it really was, a performance, and I had walked off stage too early for her liking. A voice crackled on Bethany's earpiece. Something about the guest list being reprinted due to a printer jam. I smiled inwardly, because I had told Marcus, my head of operations, to switch the final guest roster at 6 p.m. to the updated version held inside the Rosewood Lounge, which meant Bethany was standing there waving a document that was already outdated, useless, decorative like her clipboard. Still, she tried to maintain her air of importance, shielding her eyes from the lights above. "You'll need to step aside, sir. We can't hold the line." "I'm not holding anything," I replied. Scarlett narrowed her eyes, sensing something shift. She wasn't sure what yet, but her instincts were too sharp to ignore the tone in my voice. I saw the exact moment her certainty cracked, just slightly. It was in the way she licked her bottom lip quickly, like she was trying to reset her smile. Janice glanced between us. "Is this getting weird, or—" I gave them nothing. Just a nod. Then turned my gaze toward the double doors that separated the lobby from the lounge beyond, where the real guests mingled, where the night would truly begin. "You don't belong here," Scarlett finally said, her voice low, meant for me alone. It was less venom now and more desperation. A last attempt to anchor the narrative before the wind shifted. I met her eyes and held them for just a moment too long. Long enough to remind her of everything she had forgotten. What I had built, who I still was, and how little she actually knew anymore. Then I stepped aside, not because she told me to, but because I wanted her to feel the absence before the weight of the truth hit her, like the click of a door unlocking behind her. Belong? I was the foundation they were all standing on. And soon, they'd remember exactly who they were laughing at. Clara was already mid-sentence, her nasal voice rising over the lobby music as she waved her hand toward a tall man in a tailored cobalt suit. "That's my fiancé, Everett Forbes. Next 100. He just closed a Series B round with 3 of the biggest funds in Zurich, and he actually listens when I talk, unlike some people." She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't have to. Her tone did the pointing. Janice's +1, a jittery guy in a velvet blazer and patent leather shoes that screamed new money, followed closely behind. "This is Liam," she announced proudly. "He mines crypto or trades honestly, I don't know, but he made 70 grand while we waited in line last week." Liam gave me a nod, then looked at his phone, clearly more interested in blockchain graphs than human conversation. Then there was Scarlett. She stood beside them like she was center stage in a well-lit play. Her smile flawless, her posture pristine, her voice dripping with effortless superiority. "Let's not pretend this is your scene, baby," she said to me. Just loud enough for her friends to hear, but not so loud it would seem cruel. That was always Scarlett's talent, delivering cruelty like a compliment. Every insult veiled in satin. I almost answered her. Almost reminded her that every curve of this lobby had been mapped out with my hand. That the scent in the air bergamot and cedarwood had been my choice after Scarlett said she wanted power with softness. That the acoustic panels in the tasting room had been custom made after I sat through a demo with a violinist who played 6 different notes until I was satisfied the room wouldn't echo too harshly. But I didn't. I just looked at her. Really looked. Her lashes fluttered like she was waiting for me to flinch. But I didn't. Instead, I tilted my head slightly and watched the smugness falter at the edges. Because I remembered her before all this. Before the cocktail dresses and curated photo shoots. Back when her idea of luxury was gas station wine and a Sunday nap. Back when we used to laugh in the silence of a broken heater, our breath fogging the air because we couldn't afford to fix it. She wasn't always like this. Or maybe she was and I just didn't notice. There was a time she'd sit cross-legged in our living room, 1,000 pieces of magazine cutouts spread around her like feathers. She used to dream out loud, tracing her fingers over glossy pages, saying things like, "Someday I want a fireplace you can see from the bathtub," or What if we had a hotel where people felt richer just breathing the air? I'd nod, pretending I wasn't already sketching floor plans in my head. She said she didn't care if I ever made it big. We'll build it together, she said, even if we are the only ones who believe. But something changed. Or maybe I did. When I pulled back from the public eye intentionally, strategically, she took it as failure. When I stopped chasing applause and started building infrastructure in silence, she read it as retreat. She didn't ask questions. She didn't notice I worked later hours, traveled more discreetly, took meetings under different names. What she noticed was the absence of headlines, the lack of Instagram mentions, the silence. Scarlett didn't marry me for status, at least not at first, but once she tasted it, she never looked back. And now here she was, playing hostess to the scene I created, acting like I was some former employee who couldn't let go of the good old days. If she only knew where I live now, not the condo she thought I was renting, not the 2-bedroom in Midtown I used as a decoy mailing address. No, my actual residence was 23 floors above us. The penthouse suite atop the Grand Imperial, built in secret, and furnished in silence, hidden in plain sight. When I bought the building's highest floor, I'd kept the deed tucked behind a private LLC that traced back through layers of shell companies so dense not even Scarlett, with her obsessive need to track everyone's status, had figured it out. I'd moved in 6 months ago after quietly finalizing renovations. My view was of the skyline she bragged about to her friends, the skyline I paid to help define. And every night I sipped whiskey beneath custom ceiling beams she once said would make a home feel safe. So while she leaned into her new circle, spouting lines like, "He's just not built for this life," I knew the real joke. The life she was showing off, I funded it. The very air of exclusivity she clung to, like perfume, it was mine. She didn't marry a man, she married a stage. And when the curtain shifted, she walked off. She thought the next act would be hers. But what she didn't realize, what none of them did, was that the script had always been mine. I watched her now, laughing at some inside joke with Clara, her hand resting on Liam's shoulder like she needed proof of proximity to relevance. She looked happy, not real happy. The kind of happy you pose for, the kind you practice in a mirror before stepping into a lobby filled with people who know more about your heels than your heart. And yet, I didn't feel hate, not anymore. I just felt distance. Like watching a beautiful house you once built get redecorated in someone else's taste. Flashy, overcrowded, unrecognizable. A house you still own, technically, but no longer want to live in. I took a breath and looked up, past the lobby, past the guests, up toward the glass that reflected the city's glow. That penthouse held everything she used to want. The quiet, the view, the sanctuary. But it held something else too. Meth man she thought she left behind. But the truth was, she hadn't left me. She'd married someone else. Status. And tonight, she was about to find out exactly what it cost her. The doors of the Grand Imperial slid open with a quiet hiss. That kind of sleek mechanical sound that always reminded me of a secret being revealed. Then he stepped through. Marcus. Black suit, sharp as a scalpel. Polished shoes so clean the chandeliers above could have used them as mirrors. He moved like a man who didn't need to check who he was. He knew, always had. Even before the Imperial existed, Marcus had been by my side first as a contracted consultant on a development in Lisbon, then later as my full-time head of security, confidant, and the man who knew more about my quiet reemergence than anyone else breathing air tonight. He spotted me instantly, even with the crowd moving around us, even in the sea of expensive haircuts and designer fabric. His radio buzzed lightly on his shoulder, but he didn't even glance at it. He was already tuned into the only signal that mattered. He crossed the lobby with measured, confident strides, parting the room like a shadow in silk. Every head turned to him, not just because of the authority he radiated, but because his expression didn't match the chaos most people were trying to orchestrate. He looked expectant. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, nodding once, just once, like a king acknowledging another king. Not loudly, not theatrically, but everyone within a 10-foot radius heard him. The name landed like glass cracking underfoot. He stepped to my side, then slightly behind, like a well-trained shadow. "We were wondering where you were," he continued, his voice cool, even utterly professional. "Your usual suite is prepared." Chef Donovan's been briefed and is standing by to begin your private tasting. The investor group's already inside. Should I let them know you've arrived?" I nodded slowly. My gaze never left Scarlett. That name Reynolds hit her harder than any slap. I could see it in the way her posture faltered for just a second, in the faint twitch near her eye as she tried to suppress it with a quick blink. The mask cracked, her breath caught, her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Clara's jaw dropped so low you could have slid a tax invoice under it. Janice's blink rate tripled. Bethany, still clutching her clipboard like a life raft, actually stumbled back a step and looked down at the guest list like it might magically revise itself. Liam froze, his phone halfway to his face, suddenly unsure if he was supposed to be taking a picture or running. But Scarlett, she didn't move. She just stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. Because to her, I had been dead, socially, professionally, publicly. She buried me under her narrative of failure. Told her friends I disappeared when things got hard. Let them believe I was just another man who couldn't keep up with her rise. She never told them I signed the checks. That I owned the bricks beneath their stilettos. That I was the reason they were drinking expensive champagne instead of sparkling cider. That I was the silence behind the success. But now, the silence had a face, a name, a witness. Marcus stood firm, professional as ever, eyes flicking to the stunned circle of guests with quiet scrutiny. He didn't smirk, didn't need to. His tone was like steel wrapped in velvet. "If you'd like, we can have your car brought around to the west entrance, Mr. Reynolds. Less foot traffic, more private." It was the perfect kill shot. The implication was clear. This wasn't just my hotel. This was my kingdom. And if I wanted to disappear, I could. If I wanted to walk straight in, I could. If I wanted anyone removed from my sight, Marcus would see it done with the same grace he just used to gut a room of gossip. I turned my head slowly and locked eyes with Scarlett. She looked so small then. All the sparkle on her dress couldn't cover the panic blooming in her expression. Her friends, once radiant with laughter, were now dimmed, disoriented, uncertain. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was unmasked. And I hadn't even raised my voice. I gave Marcus a slight nod. "No need," I said. "Let them see." That sentence wasn't for him. It was for her. Let them see. Let them watch as the man they laughed off the doorstep stepped through the very doors they thought they controlled. Let them feel the weight of every slight, every joke, every whispered mockery. Let them remember that power doesn't always announce itself with noise. Sometimes it waits. And when it arrives, it doesn't argue. It doesn't beg. It opens the door and walks in. Marcus extended his arm, not in a theatrical gesture, just the practiced motion of someone who'd done this 100 times. "After you, sir." I took one step forward. Bethany flinched. Janice gasped softly. Clara turned as if maybe, just maybe, she could pretend this wasn't happening. Scarlett stayed frozen, and I passed them without breaking stride. The glass doors parted for me, quiet and slow, revealing the grandeur of the inner lobby and the lounge beyond the world they thought belonged to them. I caught my reflection in the glass as I walked past. Same blazer, same shoes, same calm expression. But the weight had shifted. The room knew it. The air changed. Every staff member who glanced my way nodded with the reflexive respect that comes from knowing the chain of command. Scarlett's voice called out softly behind me, barely a breath. "Steve." I didn't stop. I just kept walking, Marcus a step behind me, already radioing someone in soft tones. The quiet ballet of a man fulfilling a duty. As we reached the hallway leading toward the private suites, I turned slightly, just enough to catch the fading silhouette of Scarlett and her entourage, still standing in the outer lobby like mannequins caught between seasons. The punchline had landed, and I didn't even have to tell the joke, because the truth told itself, and it echoed through the marble. I didn't rush. That was the most important thing. I walked slowly, steadily, like I belonged, because I did. The hush that settled in the wake of Marcus's announcement was thick, almost reverent. Even the pianist in the corner missed a note before recovering, his fingers hesitating on the keys as if the change in atmosphere had stiffened the air between the chords. The lobby that had once mocked me now bent, slightly, subtly, shifting its tone like a crowd watching royalty enter without warning. Marcus held the door open like a man welcoming a king into his own court. I didn't look back, not fully, but I allowed myself a half turn, just enough to glance over my shoulder and meet their stunned faces. "Ladies," I said, with the kind of calm that can't be rehearsed. "Enjoy your evening. Try not to embarrass yourselves." Clara's mouth moved, but no words came. Janice instinctively smoothed the front of her dress, like she was trying to fix something deeper than fabric. Bethany clutched her clipboard like it might save her from drowning. And Scarlet was still standing there, heels pressed too firmly into the marble, her hand dangling at her side like it had forgotten how to grip pride. I stepped into the main lobby and everything I had worked for began to shine all at once. "Mr. Reynolds," said the concierge with a nervous smile, eyes flicking quickly to the others behind me. "Welcome back." She hit a discreet button under the desk. The elevator chimed almost instantly. One of the bellhops, a sharp kid who had memorized the wine list by heart, stood at attention with the tasting menu in hand, already pivoting toward the lounge where Chef Donovan was preparing the pre-selected courses for tonight's investors. The pianist recovered, switched to a smoother tempo. Warm jazz filtered through the space as if someone had dimmed the chaos and adjusted the spotlight. The waitstaff began to murmur. Not loudly, but enough. I saw the ripple move from one server to the next, nods, whispered exchanges, glances over their shoulders. They'd seen the exchange in the entryway. The hotel grapevine would carry the story before the dessert forks were set out. Scarlet followed, late by 2 full minutes. The sound of her heels was no longer confident. It was frantic, uneven, a misstep here, a clipped toe there. She caught up beside me just as Marcus keyed in the code to the executive floor access. "Steve," she whispered, "is this a joke?" I turned to face her fully this time. I let her see the answer in my eyes before I said anything. "No, love," I said quietly. "The Grand Imperial is mine. Always has been." She blinked once, twice, as if her lashes could erase the reality in front of her. "That's not, you said you were working on something small. I said I was building. I never said what." Her mouth opened, then shut again. Her brain was still trying to catch up, like a broken GPS rerouting itself through disbelief. She glanced around the lobby, noticing now how every staff member's posture changed when they looked at me, how the host at the bar offered a slight bow as I passed, how guests were being subtly redirected to clear my path, not out of fear, but respect. She wasn't walking next to a guest anymore. She was trailing the owner. I stepped into the Rosewood Lounge, where the city's elite were already gathering: bankers, tech investors, diplomats, media execs. Soft laughter bounced off the walls, crystal clinking against polished wood. Everything was curated, down to the scent of jasmine that replaced the main lobby cedar. My scent, the one I selected after Donovan argued it should smell more earthy. I overruled him. Inside, no one hesitated. No confusion, no second guessing, just handshakes and warmth. "Reynolds," said Martin Black of Black Ventures, standing up to greet me with a grin. "So you're the ghost owner. Genius move, man. Genius." Others echoed him. "Didn't think we'd see you tonight? So the rumors were true? You've really been hiding in plain sight, huh?" Scarlet stood just behind me, stiff as a mannequin. I didn't introduce her. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need to. She was just another guest now. An outsider in the place she thought she owned by proximity. Janice and Clara hovered at the edge of the lounge, visibly unsure whether to come in or retreat. Bethany stayed frozen in the hallway, her clipboard limp at her side. I caught Scarlet glancing at them, looking for rescue. None came. Chef Donovan approached with the first tray, a carefully stacked arrangement of crab profiteroles, each infused with saffron and a hint of chili oil. He grinned at me. "Ready to start, Chef?" I said. I took my seat at the head of the private table. Where Scarlet had probably begged to sit near just hours ago, she remained standing for a full 15 seconds. She lingered, unsure whether she was even welcome anymore. She wasn't. The maitre d' cleared his throat politely. "Shall I find you a seat, ma'am?" Scarlet's eyes finally flicked to me, searching for some lifeline of familiarity. I offered none. I sipped the champagne poured into my glass and turned back toward the room. Conversations picked up. Names were exchanged. Business flowed like the wine I'd imported from a family vineyard I helped fund 5 years ago. Scarlet slipped away quietly, without a word. She disappeared the same way I once did. Only difference was, no one noticed this time, except me. And the truth. The truth had finally come home. I walked deeper into the Rosewood Lounge, each step cushioned by the hush of tailored attention. It was funny. The men and women gathered in that room, the one swirling $100, glasses of wine, and trading business cards wrapped in gold. Foil wear the same people who used to ask if I had a more senior contact when I pitched them 5 years ago. Now they stood when I approached, not out of courtesy, but out of calculation, because power doesn't always introduce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits in silence until the room tilts its axis. Martin Black stood first. The guy had a handshake like a vice and an ego to match, but tonight his grin was all admiration. "Reynolds," he said, his voice cutting through the soft piano music. "You're the ghost owner. Genius move, I mean it." He clapped me on the back like we were old war buddies, though the last time I saw him, he told me I lacked market agility. Now he looked like a fan who just scored backstage access. Keeping your name off the paperwork, owning the whole building through layers, that's art. That's how you play the long game. I smiled, not to gloat, but to confirm. Yes, it was me. The man they whispered about, the one they thought had vanished. I didn't disappear. I multiplied. Silently, strategically, and now the harvest had arrived. More men rose, one after another. A David Chen, a Natasha Khan, a Victor Sterling. These weren't casual networkers. They were names that could swing entire industries. Each of them extended their hands. Some knew the truth already. Others were learning it in real time. But all of them shared one reaction: respect. The kind that can't be bought. Only earnador, in my case earned, disrespected, and then reclaimed with interest. The only person who didn't move was Scarlett. She had followed me into the lounge like a ghost, shadowing the man she used to know. But she wasn't seated at the table. She stood to the side, next to the bar, trying to look unbothered. Her friends were nowhere in sight. Clara had ducked out after the pianist changed keys, and Janice was awkwardly chatting with someone near the coat check like she just remembered another party across town. Scarlett tried to smile when someone glanced at her, but her smile cracked under the weight of knowing she no longer held the spotlight. She wasn't the center of this world. She was barely a footnote. Her dress, that shimmery green thing she wore like armor, now felt desperate, too loud, too forced. Her posture, once straight and commanding, wilted slightly each time someone ignored her. I didn't have to humiliate her. The truth had already taken that role, and it was doing a flawless job. From across the room, I watched her attempt to intercept the conversation. She stepped toward two investors, her voice falsely sweet. "Isn't this place stunning? My ex used to work in design." But they weren't listening. Their attention was locked on me. Not her, me. And Scarlett, for the first time in a long while, realized she didn't know how to exist without being central. A waiter approached me with a glass of red from my private collection, one that had never been listed on the hotel's public wine list. I took a slow sip, smooth, aged, quiet yet complex. Just like the revenge Scarlett never saw coming. "Is that your ex-wife?" Natasha asked quietly, glancing in Scarlett's direction as she took a seat beside me. Her tone wasn't judgmental, just curious. I remember reading something about her online a while back. She was dating that startup guy with the teeth, right? I gave a subtle nod. "She tends to find the camera." "And now?" Natasha asked, her brows lifting. "She found her reflection," I said calmly. The whispers had begun. The murmurs. I could feel them inching through the room like rising heat. "That's the guy she laughed at in the lobby." "You mean, he owns this? I thought he was broke." She treated him like help. Guess he was just letting her talk. I didn't need to say a word. The room would carry the story for me. The memory of the woman who mocked the owner outside his own building would be etched into their minds before dessert was served. Scarlett's eyes met mine for a split second, and in that glance, everything collapsed. Her certainty, her posture, the carefully curated image she crafted over the past year. All of it flickered and fell apart under the realization that the man she once saw as an obstacle had built the very path she now stumbled on. Her hand went to the necklace she always wore when she wanted to look expensive. It was a reflex, like reaching for a rope when you're already underwater. Another guest approached me, a city planner with whom I've been working on a new district development. We talked numbers, timelines, potential partners. I answered fluidly, focused, unbothered. Behind him, I saw Janice return briefly, whisper something to Scarlett, and then vanish again, probably fleeing the awkwardness, hoping not to be mistaken for part of the losing team. That's what it was now. Teams. Not couples, not acquaintances, teams. And Scarlett had backed the wrong one. She was shrinking in real time, not physically, but socially. Her value had always been tied to her proximity to power. But now the power had shifted, and she had no anchor, no new man on her arm, no whispered deal in her ear, no fallback. Just her and the maybe this isn't your scene anymore she'd once told me. But tonight, she was the one out of place. Not because the room had changed, because she had never understood who built it. I watched her move toward the exit. Slow, small steps. Her eyes darted left and right as if hoping someone would stop her. No one did. Not Clara, not Janice. Not even the waitstaff who used to greet her with a performative warmth. She reached the door and paused, hand on the frame, looking back one last time. I didn't look away. In that moment, that final fractured second, was the true toast of the evening. Not the wine, not the menu, but the silence, the kind that says everything. The room had softened. Or maybe I had. The clinking of cutlery on porcelain had become rhythmic, almost musical around me. Voices hummed in rich undertones, old friends reconnecting, new alliances forming, money dancing across napkins folded into triangles. Yet I sat still, glass in hand, watching the last traces of Scarlett's presence vanish behind the lounge doors. She didn't return, not to the table, not to the moment. She had exited the scene she once believed was hers, without applause, without grace, without even an echo of the woman she tried so hard to become. I leaned back in the high-backed velvet chair, deep navy trimmed with antique brass studs, and let the moment settle. Across from me, Martin Black was talking about international expansion, gesturing over a lamb carpaccio that cost more than most people's rent. I nodded, but my eyes drifted across the table to where Scarlett had once stood. Not long ago, she would have commanded that space with every ounce of force, charm she could summon. But tonight, the spotlight had moved. Not with bluster, but with quiet gravity. I raised my glass and stood. The voices around me quieted, like obedient children at a family gathering. Chairs shifted. Conversations paused. Even Donovan, halfway through plating the next course, lowered his spoon and looked up. I hadn't planned on speaking, but the moment felt designed for it, as if the silence itself was waiting for my voice. Thank you all. I began, letting the words roll without performance. No microphone, no cue, just presence. For being here tonight, for believing in the Grand Imperial, in the vision we built together. This place was never about marble or chandeliers or imported glassware. I paused, fingers curling lightly around the stem of my wine glass. It was about creating space for those who understood the difference between noise and value. Some nodded, others leaned in, like they already knew where this was going but still wanted to hear it from me. I spent a long time in the background. I continued, letting my voice stay steady. People mistook silence for absence. They assumed humility meant failure. But perspective, I said, holding up the glass slightly, is the one investment that always appreciates. A few quiet chuckles. No laughter, just recognition. I didn't say Scarlett's name. I didn't need to. The room knew. Everyone seated at that table had seen what happened in the lobby, had felt the shift in energy when Marcus said my name, had watched the mask fall from her face and shatter in real time. And while some might have once applauded her elegance, now they saw the truth. That elegance, borrowed without gratitude, is just vanity on stilts. I tilted my glass slightly toward the chef station where Donovan was pretending not to eavesdrop. To those who build in silence, I said. To the rooms we craft when no one is watching. And to the people who remind us that rejection is often the most honest invitation to evolve. We drank slowly, thoughtfully. As I lowered my glass, I caught sight of a familiar figure walking toward the table. Alan Peterson, a silver-haired real estate developer whose name alone could sway bank policies. But he wasn't approaching me with numbers. He was holding an envelope, thick, cream-colored, sealed in deep crimson wax. This came from your father-in-law, he said discreetly, placing the envelope beside my plate. I raised an eyebrow. Ex-father-in-law, Alan smiled faintly, still calls you son-in-law, Says you were the only man who ever finished a project you promised. I cracked the seal slowly and pulled out the contents. The title deed to a countryside estate I knew they'd been eyeing for months. Scarlett had mentioned it once in passing, hoping they'd get approved to lease it after her father's fourth application had been rejected. She called it a reset space. I bought it the same week. Inside the envelope was a single note written in crisp penmanship. For the man who doesn't need applause to know he's made a sound. Thank you. I folded the note and slid it back inside. That wasn't revenge. That was clarity. Her father, stoic, calculating, rarely affectionate, had always seen through the noise, even if he never said it aloud. Maybe he knew who had really funded the backbone of the Imperial. Maybe he simply recognized what his daughter had thrown away. Either way, the message was received. Across the table, Natasha Khan raised her glass again. That was beautifully said, Steve. You've managed something most of us spent decades trying to learn, how to win without shouting. I nodded. Sometimes you win by letting them think you've lost. Plates were cleared. Dessert arrived. Dark chocolate souffle with aged port and sea salt. Donovan winked as he passed me, like he was proud of more than just the food. Around the table, the tone shifted from reverence to warmth. My guests were comfortable now. They knew where the power sat. They no longer had to guess who wrote the checks. They could stop pretending. The evening's weight didn't press against my chest. It lifted. Scarlett had always believed I was chasing something status, attention, validation. What she never understood was that I'd stopped chasing the day I realized I could build things no one could take away. You can divorce a man, but you can't undo what he's created. That's what this hotel was, my monument to quiet resilience. And tonight, in a room full of curated taste and designer guests, the truth stood taller than the chandeliers. As the laughter grew and glasses refilled, I sat back again, pressing my fingers lightly against the envelope still resting beside my wine, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Some victories don't come with cheering. Some just come with silence so complete, you finally hear yourself again. The fallout didn't wait until morning. It began while the souffle was still warm. Marcus met me at the private elevator just after midnight, his voice low and composed, but with that subtle edge I knew meant something was brewing. There's been movement, he said. Calls, messages. A few very embarrassed people trying to reverse engineer the night. I didn't ask for details right away. I just followed him into the elevator, the doors gliding shut behind us. The mirrored panels reflected back a man I almost didn't recognize. Not because I looked different, but because the weight I used to carry on my shoulders was gone, replaced by something sharper, lighter, clarity. The suite had been reset for late night service. Fireplace on, fresh fruit, espresso on standby. My assistant had already gone home, and the staff had been instructed to leave the floor alone unless summoned. Marcus handed me his tablet and began to summarize. Clara's fiancé, he said, pulled his investment from her boutique co-op, no warning. Told her he doesn't do business with amateurs who can't read the room. He tapped the screen and pulled up a photo. Clara leaving the Imperial, her makeup smudged, face drawn. She wasn't with Everett anymore. Not in the shot, not in the car, not in the story. I nodded once. No glee, just acknowledgement, cause and effect. Janice's crypto guy, he went on, vanished at valet. She waited 35 minutes, never came back, never answered a text. He gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. A few guests overheard her say she didn't know your name. Sounds accurate, I said. Bethany was removed from the planning committee for the fall gala, Marcus added, now almost clinically. Apparently, one of the senior partners saw how she handled you at the entrance. They didn't like that a member of the planning board mocked the owner in public. Optics. Always about the optics, I murmured, setting the tablet down and walking to the window. Below me, the city shimmered. Glass, towers, endless motion. The blur of luxury and loneliness dancing through midnight like old lovers pretending to have something new. I pressed one hand to the cool glass and exhaled. What about Scarlett? I asked, knowing he'd waited to mention her. She called twice, he said. Block number the first time. I declined it. Second time, she left a voicemail. Didn't say much, just asked to meet. Said it was important. I turned from the window slowly. And then she called again. This time she reached the hotel line. I answered. I raised an eyebrow. He continued. She accused us of orchestrating a humiliation. Said, You set her up." He folded his hands behind his back. And then she begged. The word landed gently, but we both felt the weight of it. Begged. Not asked. Not pleaded. Begged. I walked to the bar, poured a small glass of neat bourbon, and stared at the amber swirl before lifting it to my lips. "She's not used to losing." She didn't expect to lose to silence, Marcus said. That was the part that always surprised people. They were prepared for confrontation, for shouting, for lawsuits or ultimatums or some public spectacle. But they never saw it coming when the ground simply disappeared beneath their feet. When no one shouted, when no one fought, just quiet, just gravity, just consequences. She said, "I humiliated her," I murmured. "You didn't," he said. "She humiliated herself. You just left the lights on." I nodded again, sipping slowly. Marcus understood the nuance of this better than most. That's why he was the only one who knew the whole plan. Because he could hold the line between justice and spectacle. Because he never mistook ego for strategy. "She'll want to see you," he said carefully. "She saw me," I replied. I didn't need a meeting. I didn't need an apology. What I needed had already happened. Scarlett stood in a room full of people and saw her reflection for the first time. Not the version she curated on social media, not the one dressed in labels or polished for gallery openings, but the real one. The version who traded love for clout, intimacy for proximity, and never thought the cost would catch up. And tonight, it did. She lost her audience. And without one, Scarlett didn't know how to perform. Marcus cleared his throat. "There's one more thing." I turned. She came back after the lounge cleared out, slipped into the lobby, asked for access to the elevator, and she said she left something in your suite. I raised an eyebrow. "She's never been in my suite." "Exactly." He offered a small smile. She said it 3 times, like if she believed it hard enough, it might become true. I didn't respond right away. I just walked back to the window, glass in hand, heartbeat steady. She wasn't trying to retrieve something. She was trying to re-enter the story. The problem was, the story had already turned its final page on her chapter. "She won't call again," I said. "No," Marcus agreed, "but she'll remember." That was the real ending, wasn't it? Not a dramatic exit, not a slam door or fiery letter, just the quiet permanence of being remembered, not fondly, but clearly, like a lesson, like a warning, like a scar that no longer hurts but still itches in the cold. I sipped the last of my drink and stepped away from the window. "Anything else?" I asked. Marcus shook his head. "Only that your silence hit louder than her pride could absorb." I gave him a nod of dismissal, and he turned, walking back to the elevator with the discipline of a man who knew how to disappear. The doors closed behind him, and I was alone again. Not lonely, just alone with my building, my name, my stillness. I sat down in the same chair where I'd first sketched the model of the Imperial, back when I could barely afford the software license. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line across a fresh page. Sometimes you don't have to burn a bridge. You just stop carrying people across it. The envelope was matte black with a single embossed seal. No note, no monogram, just wait. The kind that carried closure. My attorney delivered it at 7:32 a.m., precisely when I asked. He didn't knock, just slid it through the door slot of the penthouse like a final signature on a ledger that had already been balanced. I picked it up in silence and set it on the kitchen counter beside a bowl of chilled figs I had no appetite for. Inside was everything Scarlett would need. The divorce papers, cleanly structured, no theatrics, no long-winded prologue, just legal language straightforward and sharp. She would see the clause where I relinquished her name from any association with the Imperial, and the section where I detailed the financial transfer of silent severance, not a gift. My name was nowhere on the envelope. It didn't need to be. The paper spoke for itself. No speech, no final meeting, just an end. I moved through the penthouse barefoot, the floor chilled underfoot from the morning's air cycling through hidden vents. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, scattering across the marble like spilled champagne. I paused at the window overlooking the grand courtyard, where a few early guests wandered in their robes, coffees in hand. They had no idea the building itself was grieving a goodbye it had waited too long to say, because the Grand Imperial remembered everything. Every word Scarlett said in the hallway before she laughed at my shoes. Every snide glance Clara cast like perfume into the air. Every stutter Bethany made as she pretended not to recognize me. The marble steps, the oak banisters, the custom glass panistay all held memory. And memory doesn't vanish just because the people do. I showered and dressed without thought. Black slacks, crisp white shirt, no tie. I ironed it myself. The act calmed me, reminding me that some rituals are better done alone. I adjusted the cuffs, then opened the door to the hallway, where Leah was already waiting. Tablet in hand, eyes bright, posture proud. She reminded me of myself once, when all I had was blueprints and debt and a vision no one respected until it came with proof. "Morning," she said, walking a step beside me as we made our way toward the elevator. "Your schedule today is tight but controlled. Board review at 11 o'clock, Urban Commission check-in at 2 o'clock. And she hesitated, then added, "The lawyers confirmed that everything's been served. As of this hour, you are officially unbound." "Unbound?" I echoed, pressing the elevator button. The word felt clenant, celebratory, not sad, just factual. A release from a contract that had long stopped being about love and had become a slow suffocation of respect. She hesitated again. Was it hard? "No," I said simply. "It was just overdue." The elevator opened and we descended in silence. As we reached the lobby, staff members nodded as I passed, some subtly, others more openly now. The mystery was over. I wasn't the ghost in the penthouse anymore. I was the name behind the weight. And none of them would ever mock me again. Not because they feared me, but because they finally saw me. At the concierge's desk, I paused. There was a small package addressed to me. No return label. I opened it without ceremony. Inside was a photograph. It had been taken 3 years ago, when Scarlett and I stood together in front of the unfinished Imperial shell. Steel beams behind us, hard hats crooked. She had her arm looped through mine, her smile wide and wild with ambition. On the back, in faded ink, she had written, "We'll build forever, even if no one claps." I let the photo rest on the desk. She'd forgotten her own vow. Or maybe she never meant it. Either way, forever had ended. Leah stepped closer. "Want me to throw that out?" "No," I said. "Let it stay. This building remembers. It deserves to hold all of it." We walked through the main lobby, past the Rosewood Lounge, where a new round of guests were being seated for brunch. Marcus stood near the entry, arms crossed, giving a subtle nod as we passed. He didn't say anything, he didn't need to. I paused at the front entrance. The same doors that once refused me now slid open without resistance. The morning air kissed my face like a welcome home. Outside, traffic hummed and horns chirped, but everything inside me stayed still. I took one long breath, then turned back toward the glass and looked up. The building rose above me like an old friendone that had endured the worst of me, the best of me, and still stood without flinching. This place wasn't just a hotel. It was my memory made tangible. It was the proof that I hadn't wasted my years in someone else's shadow. I had built the shadow they all now moved within. From my pocket, I pulled a small key, gold-plated, engraved with the number 2301, the penthouse. I turned it over once in my palm, then handed it to Leah. "You're promoting me?" she asked, surprised. "You're managing the floor," I replied. "Starting today?" She blinked. "But you've already been doing it. This just makes it official." Her eyes softened, pride tempered by discipline. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," I said. "This place will test you." She smiled. "So did you." I let the glass doors close behind me. Not with finality, but with rhythm. The kind of rhythm you get after you've rewritten a story on your own terms. Scarlett would receive the papers today. She'd read them alone, probably in whatever penthouse she'd been pretending was hers. Maybe she'd cry. Maybe she'd call again. Maybe she'd frame the envelope and tell herself she survived something tragic. But I didn't leave her. I reclaimed myself. And now I could walk into any room, into any future, without explanation. Because the only story that mattered was the one built in silence, written in steel and marble, and sealed by a building that never forgot who placed the first stone.